Hello aspirants, a very warm welcome to Scholar IAS. This is Rohan, your faculty for International Relations and Internal Security. So in today's session, we're going to talk about a hot and burning issue. In fact, which had occupied a lot of digital space and media space in the last 1 week or so. And this made for a lot of interesting reading as well, because something like this was unprecedented, right? The Suez Canal crisis, and I'm talking about the Suez Canal crisis of 2021. I'm not referring to the Suez Canal crisis of 1956. So let's start with our discussion on this, because it seems almost unthinkable that a small canal and a ship is stuck there, and the entire global chains and the global logistics are affected by that. In fact, it turned out to be, or it snowballed into a major issue, and there were worries about the delays in container traffic, delays in vessels arriving at the ports, and also perhaps even cost escalation. So let's take a look at the crisis. Yeah. So let's understand the basics of Suez Canal first. Suez Canal is a sea level waterway running north-south across the Isthmus of Suez, right? An isthmus is a geographical body which is surrounded by water, right, on three sides, and it connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea. So these are the basics, and which can be asked in geography as well, right? So you need to have a good grip on that. The canal separates the African continent from Asia, and it provides the shortest maritime route between Europe and the lands lying around the Indian and Pacific West Oceans. So typically speaking, or historically speaking, all the explorers and all the traders from Europe used to circumvent the entire continent of Africa around the Cape of Good Hope, and then they used to enter into the Indian Ocean. From therein, they got access to not only the Indian Ocean region, but also Pacific by crossing the Strait of Malacca between Indonesia and Malaysia. But with the opening of Suez Canal, it was not only a human endeavor, but it was at that point in time, it was one of the wonders of the world that we created such a water body which actually connected waters of the two oceans, that is Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. This was unthinkable at that point in time. It took about 10 years to build that canal. If I'm not wrong, the construction work on the canal had started in 1859 and it was completed in 1869. One must also understand that the canal extends through a stretch of 193 kilometers between the port side in the north and the Suez in the south. Now, a lot of dredging activity was conducted. Now, what is dredging? When the trawlers in the sea, when they dig into the seabed, that act is called as dredging. And by using dredging as an activity, we reclaim a lot of land in the sea. That is how generally islands are reclaimed. Even the city of Mumbai has been reclaimed to a large extent by using dredgers. The Ram Setu, which is being built, is also being built by using dredgers. In fact, we have the Dredging Corporation of India Limited, which is quite active in the Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, and the Arabian Sea region. So Suez Canal is a man-made wonder which was created in the 19th century to facilitate the trade between Europe and Asia by connecting Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. Also, quite notably, one must understand here that it brought down the cost of transportation and thereby bringing down the cost of the per unit cost of various articles which were transported or traded between Europe and Asia and even beyond those regions. So quite naturally, global trade got a shot in the arm, and also because of this canal, global trade became a lot more cost effective, right? So basically the canal, there is one more shortest route which is available across the Isthmus of Suez, which is only 121 kilometers, which is 75 miles. But instead it utilizes several lakes from north to south. Now these are the lakes which could be asked in the exam. Those are namely Lake Manzala, Lake Timsa, and Bitter Lakes. That is a Great Bitter Lake and the Little Bitter Lake. In fact, these lakes are used for lodging the ships over there. These lakes are used for towing the ships in these areas in case of any operational error or in case of any maintenance work required, right? So the canal is owned and maintained by the Suez Canal Authority, which belongs to Egypt. Egypt controls the canal, and Egypt mobilizes billions of dollars of revenue every year through the shipping costs or through the passing charges in the canal. In 1956, there was a Suez Canal crisis wherein countries like England and France tried to snatch away the Suez Canal from Egypt, but their then leader, Gamal Abdel Nasser, had shown a very strong will, and he defied the challenge put forward by these powers, by, of course, with the intervention of USA, USSR, and China. Right. So the canal is owned and maintained by the Suez Canal Authority of Egypt and also under the Convention of Constantinople. It may be used in the time of war as in the time of peace by every vessel of commerce or of war without distinction of flag. So this is something which again could be asked in UPSC prelims. Which of the following statements regarding Suez Canal are correct? So yes, under the Convention of Constantinople, the canal can be used by any ship belonging to any region, belonging to any country, either in the time of peace or in the time of war. The Convention of Constantinople is a treaty which is signed between the United Kingdom, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Spain, France, Italy, Netherlands, Russian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire on 29th of October 1888. And it is this convention which still dates regulates the use of Suez Canal, quite notably speaking here. So all the signatories, basically, if you take a look at them, these are all, most of them are colonial powers. So the signatories comprised all the great European powers in 1888, and the treaty was interpreted as a guaranteed right of passage of all ships through the Suez Canal during war and peace. Right. So in the prelims, they can ask you a question, and thereby they can confuse you by saying that Suez Canal cannot be used in a free manner during wartime, which is in fact untrue. So you will have to understand this particular concept, and you will have to be actually physically and mentally present in the exam to be able to look at these small details and not slip into the traps which are going to be created by UPSC. So a typical representation of this is important because if you take a look at the visual representation or this map, you will understand the positioning, the geostrategic location of Suez Canal in greater detail. So this is port side in the northern part, wherein the Mediterranean Sea enters into the canal. Then this is the canal side, right? Here you will see that these are the lakes. This is the Great Bitter Lake. This is Lake Timsa. And this is El Balapas, where you will find, if you take a close look at that, you will find that there are two lanes of canals, right? And then on the southern side, you have Suez, right? This is also called as the Gulf of Suez. And basically on the left-hand side or on the western side, you have Egypt, right? So bordering the Suez Canal, right? So moving on, this is the Sinai Peninsula, as you can see, and this region is the Suez Canal region. So this is the port side on the northern side. This is Suez Canal, right? This is the Great Bitter Lake. There are a few lakes like Lake Timsa also here. Okay. And the ship was stuck somewhere in the southern part, if I'm not wrong, right? In this part where there is only one lane to pass, unfortunately. This is the Gulf of Suez, and this is the Gulf of Aqaba. The Gulf of Aqaba is between Saudi Arabia and Sinai Peninsula, that is Egypt. So you have to be absolutely very clear. They can ask you about Gulf of Aqaba also. Right. This is the Strait of Tiran, which is basically separating the island of Tiran, which belongs to Saudi Arabia, and Sinai Peninsula again, which belongs to Egypt. So a question could be expected on Gulf of Aqaba, which is basically between Sinai Peninsula of Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and also borders in the northern side Israel, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. You have the Gulf of Suez, where on the northern side or on the southern side you have Suez port, and on the northern side of the canal you have port side, which basically is in the Mediterranean, right? So you will see that from west to east, how you travel, first is Egypt, then is Israel, and then is Saudi Arabia. In fact, if you see closely here in the Gulf of Aqaba, you will have Jordan also, which borders the Gulf of Aqaba, right? So questions are expected on these lines, okay? And therefore I would suggest that all of you take a look at this in what you can say in a detailed manner. So the Suez Canal crisis of 2021, let's take a look at that. Let's understand that. So a large cargo ship named Ever Given got stuck near the southern end of Suez Canal, and the operating company's name is Evergreen Shipping. Now the issue is fairly easy to understand. Basically, the canal is not very what you can say very wide, and the ship size was very big. In fact, the length of the ship is said to be greater than the height of Empire State Building. So one can understand the extent and the magnitude of this big monolith of a ship, right? In fact, it is said to have it is said to be carrying more than 20,000 shipping containers. So this might give you an idea of how big a ship this was. Okay, now in the width, canal is not great, and because of poor visibility and because of high winds, the ship kind of got deflected and it ran aground on March 23rd, and the authorities then scrambled to free it for days. They used excavators, they used dredgers, they used tugboats and towboats and fishing trawlers also to actually refloat the ship, but it took a lot of time, right? And because it took a lot of time, traffic was building on the northern side of the Suez Canal. Basically, the ships which were coming from Europe into the Mediterranean and then into the canal, there was a traffic jam. And because of that, the uh, trade lines between Europe and Asia were greatly disrupted. Many ships had also decided to take a longer route across the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. But of course, you need to understand here that once you decide to take the route by circumventing all of Africa, then it leads to a delay of about 2 weeks, which is something which can add to a lot of inefficiency and which can build up losses within the organizations. So anyways, salvage teams had been working on both land and water day in and day out for about 6 days, dredging sand and removing rock from both the ends of the ship, which had blocked passage by any ship. There were also tugboats, which were aided by a high spring tide. Eventually, it was high tide, which came to the rescue of these rescue efforts, and finally, the ship was refloated. The salvagers had, in the meanwhile, tried several remedies, pulling the ship with tugboats, dredging underneath the hull, and using a front-end loader to excavate the eastern embankment, where the bow of the ship was stuck. Bow is the front part of the ship, and stern, S-T-E-R-N, is the back part of the ship. Okay, so vessel size was also enormous. As you can see, it was about what you can say 2 lakh metric tons, and it had made those salvage efforts very, very difficult. In fact, the Suez Canal authorities at one point in time had decided to unload the ship, to unload the cargo containers, so that the ship becomes light, and then it would become easy to actually navigate and mobilize the ship out of the canal. But fortunately speaking, hours before the Ever Given was freed, basically what you see is that just in the nick of time, Ever Given was freed. It was refloated. And when it was refloated, 367 vessels were already waiting to pass to the canal. So you can see the sheer buildup of the traffic in that area. 367 vessels would mean lakhs and lakhs of containers, right? And it could also mean oil tankers. It could also mean containers which were carrying fertilizers in their hull, containers which were carrying steel and cement. And any delay in the provisioning or in the transport of these basic commodities and essential commodities might also lead to a temporary situation of inflation in many countries. So one ship this time had an unprecedented impact on global economy and global trading. Some ship owners had already decided to cut their losses and reroute the vessels, as I told you, around the Cape of Good Hope, which is at the southern tip of Africa, which added at least 2 to 3 weeks to the shipping journeys. Quite naturally, since there was transportation delay, it led to increased oil prices, and the long-term impact of this block will depend on how long it lasts, right? But now you say that the ship has been refloated, so the traffic jam has now been cleared. No, the ship has been refloated and it has been taken to the Great Bitter Lake. But you see that there are 367, about 400 ships which were waiting. So it takes time to give them a pass. It takes time for customs verification, and therefore some ships which are carrying critical material or critical cargo like oil, they may be given a safe passage, or they may be given an early passage through the canal. But it will still take a long time to clear the entire traffic load from the area, right? Now, this route is also obviously very important for India because it is a Suez Canal which connects the busy ports in Europe like Rotterdam with Indian ports like JNPT, Kandla and Mundra, where a lot of chemical fertilizers, a lot of iron ore, steel, a lot of coal, and even a lot of oil comes, right? So petroleum goods, organic chemicals, iron and steel, automobile, machinery, textiles and carpets, handicrafts, furniture, leather goods, all of these goods were under all of these goods are basically transported by using this particular route. So you can imagine the kind of impact that it may have potentially on India. Now, fortunately, the crisis has been averted and the ship has been refloated within a stipulated amount of time. But had the deadlock or had the traffic jam continued or persisted, then that would have added a lot of dollars to India's import bill as well, right? Now, when you talk about India-US relations, for India, though you see that there is a lot of import and export of methane with the US and ethanol also, there is imports of crude from Latin America, the uptake of which was recently increased. Why? Because there are sanctions on Iran. So we are basically taking a lot of crude oil from Latin America, from countries like what you can say, Venezuela and Cuba, right? So the longer the closure, the more disruptive the impact is likely to be. Now, when you talk about the global dependence on this narrow waterway, the incidents also raises questions about finding solutions and finding alternatives, because this is a situation which can occur in the future also, owing to the large size of the ships which are plying through this area. Right. So it is important to reduce the dependence on only one channel, and it is important to create another channel, perhaps through the Gulf of Aqaba also. Right. Now, there was, let me tell you what is Gulf of Aqaba. So this is Gulf of Aqaba. You can connect the Mediterranean you can connect the Red Sea through the Gulf of Aqaba by charting or drawing a canal here also. There were plans afoot to draw a canal through this region in the 19th and the 20th century, but these plans were given up after because there were some operational errors or operational difficulties, and there was a problem with some of the countries also not being on board with the plan, right? So because of political issues and because of operational issues and technical issues, it is difficult to draw or chart out a second canal from the region. But nevertheless, this crisis has demonstrated the fact that there has to be an alternative, because the trade relations between Europe and Asia are actually the lifeline of global trading regime today, because more than 60% of the global traffic belongs to this particular region, right? Then there was, see, you could be asked a question on Suez Canal crisis of 1956 also. So Suez Canal crisis of 1956 was basically an international crisis in the Middle East, which is the Gulf region. So in 1954, there was a lot of pressure building up on the Egyptian nationalists, right? And the two countries signed a 7-year treaty that led to the withdrawal of British troops. So British troops had eventually withdrawn from that particular area. And then the then Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser, he nationalized the Suez Canal to pay for the construction of a dam on the Nile. And perhaps he was well within his rights to do so. At that point in time, colonial powers like Britain, France, and even Israel, they took offense to this, and they invaded that particular part of the canal to reclaim control, because they felt that monopolization of Suez Canal was to the detriment of global trading. But that assault was neutralized, and it failed when USA intervened, and when US President Dwight Eisenhower refused to back the military intervention, which was a decision very well thought out and which finally underscored Britain's decline to a second-tier power. At that point in time, there was a tussle between Britain and USA regarding establishing their hegemony on global politics. But America's overpowering of UK in this particular crisis underlined the fact and drove home the fact that it was in fact America or USA which was the global hegemon, and Britain was subjugated to being a second-tier power. Right. This led to the Suez Crisis with UK, France, and Israel, which mounted an attack on Egypt, and finally the conflict ended in 1957 after due intervention from China, USA, and USSR. Right here, there is no mention of it, but you have to say USA, USSR, which is Soviet Russia, and even China. Okay. So the conflict ended in 1957 after the United Nations also got involved, and basically the UN peacekeeping forces were deployed. In 1967, Gamal Abdel Nasser ordered peacekeeping forces out of Sinai, leading to a new conflict between the two countries. And Israelis occupied Sinai, and in response, Egypt closed the canal to all shipping. This closure lasted until 1975, unnecessarily bottling up and blocking a key trade route. And then the two countries signed a disengagement accord, and the canal was then the focal point of the Arab-Israeli war again in 1973. Here, the Arab coalition was led by Egypt and Syria. Right. So there was a 6 days war also. So this is how you understand the particular Suez Canal crisis. Right. I have also talked about the Suez Canal crisis of 2021. So in our best estimate, it feels like there could be a question on the geographical features in the Sinai Peninsula, or there could be a question on the Convention of Constantinople, right? Or there could be a question on lakes, the Great Bitter Lake, Lake Timsah, and Lake Manzala. Okay, so therefore, a all-round view of this particular issue is to be taken very seriously. This much is more than enough. There is no need to unnecessarily dig deep. There is no need to unnecessarily, what they say, dredge into the issue. right? This much is enough. This is something that is going to help you in the exam if in case they decide to ask you a question on that. So this is Rohan Dange as of now signing off from Skholar IAS. I'll see you in the next lecture when I'll be dealing with topics based on economy. So till the time we meet next, take care and have a happy weekend.